Hi, this is Michael Buffer, and welcome to the BoxHard Podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is Mikey Garcia.
This the monster from the swamps, Regis Rougarou Program.
Hey, what's up? This is King Carlos Molina, former IBF world champ.
This is Michael, the Bounty Hunter, 2012 Olympian and your people's champ.
This is Charlie Edwards, flyweight champion of the world.
This is Fast Eddie Chambers, and you're listening to the BoxHard Podcast with my main man, Joey Coastman.
Hello everybody and welcome to episode 428 of the BoxHard Podcast. I'm your host Joey Coastman. I'm joined as ever by former heavyweight world title challenger Mr. Fast Eddie Chambers. Eddie, how you doing this week, sir?
I'm doing great, my man. How about you?
Always good when speaking with you, Eddie. It's going to be a slightly different show to normal. It's the end of year special, so part one we will be obviously reviewing the big card that went down in Saudi and a couple of others. Then we'll welcome our special guest, and then in part two we will go through all the BoxHard awards, like the best knockout, best fighter, best fight, best female fighter, etc. So like I say, let's start straight away with the card that went down at the Kingdom Arena in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. I'm going to start with the undercard. So let's go right to the bottom of the card. I don't know if this was the first fight on. I can't entirely remember the running order, but Filip Hrgović, now 17-0, Eddie, a first round TKO against Mark Demori, friend of the show, now 41-3 with 2 draws. The first real punch of significance, hurt Mark. He kind of turned away momentarily, looked like he didn't know where he was. Obviously took a little bit more punishment, end up getting stopped. I think his towel, the towel in the corner came in. It's exactly what we expected Eddie from that fight there. We didn't expect many rounds. I think just to be on the safe side, we said it would happen in the first 6. You were very confident saying it's probably in the first 3. But yeah, big Filip Hrgović with the first round TKO. Did you see that one?
No, I didn't actually get a chance to see it. I was struggling to finally, because by the time I got a chance to actually watch the card, I was on the road, and I was actually the one driving, so I couldn't be watching it. But I was trying to get updates from you and from different people on what was going on, especially since I had my parlay running, which didn't turn out too well, obviously. But that was one fight I was extremely sure of there was going to be, as we called it. So, but yeah, I didn't see that one. I missed it.
You didn't miss too much. We also said in agreement last week that Frank Sanchez would go over 5.5 rounds. A lot of people didn't think that would happen, but we got that one right as well. I said, Junior Farr getting stopped in a round by Lucas Brown doesn't necessarily mean Frank Sanchez is going to go in there and blast him out. He's not really a quick starter. And it was quite a good fight, to be honest. The early parts of the fight, it was quite an even one. Junior Farr, I think, picked up a couple of the early rounds. So did Frank Sanchez. I think I see some people saying it was like 2-2 after 4 rounds. But in the end, Frank Sanchez, when he got to Junior Farr, he really got to him, landed some great shots, I think, in round 6, got the TKO in round 7. He's now 24-0. Junior Farr now 20-3. That one was for the WBO, NABO and WBC Continental America's heavyweight titles. Also on the card, this was a fight here that we were split on, Eddie. I went with Daniel Dubois, who's now 20-2. You went with Jarrell Big Baby Miller, who's now 26-1 with a draw, a TKO in the 10th and final round. I believe there was about 4 seconds or 6 seconds left in the round. Big Baby Miller found himself against the ropes, wasn't answering back, taking a lot of heavy head jolting shots, and the referee waved it off. From a Miller point of view, I was quite kind of let down that he didn't make the distance. He was just a few seconds away. I think he deserved to go the distance, but obviously the referee, if that was earlier on in the fight, round 5 or whatever, I would have been saying that the referee 100% made the right decision by stopping it. But I think just because there was only 5 seconds left or whatever in the round to completely finish the fight, there's a bit of me that goes, oh, maybe he shouldn't have done it. But to be honest, if you are taking that kind of punishment, it shouldn't really matter what round you're in or how long's left in a round. Obviously, if you're taking enough shots where you should get stopped at any point in the fight if that sequence were to happen, I think. So, really, really good performance from Daniel Dubois. Very impressed. He started fast. I liked his first round. You know, everything was from the jab. He would let go of the 1-2 quite nicely, straight down the pipe, keeping it long, wasn't letting Big Baby's slow feet get into range and turn it into a fight on the inside, because obviously that was what Miller wanted to do the whole fight. I was quite impressed with Daniel Dubois, but like I say, after a couple of rounds, I'd say maybe 2 or 3 rounds, he seemed like he was kind of getting tired with having to do that, because he's not a back foot fighter, but he was fighting on the back foot a lot. So yeah, I think it started to become a bit troublesome for him getting into the mid sort of part of the fight, I'd say. But yeah, you know, like I say, I have to reiterate, I liked the game. I liked the fact that he was effectively boxing off the back foot, completely against his usual kind of footprint, if you like. It was smart stuff, but then he did get drawn in. And after having a lot of good starts to rounds, in the second half of rounds, he was starting to take a lot of punishment. You know, he seemed to be getting tired towards the end of each round. And that was worrying signs, actually, because that was going on quite early on in the fight. Around about that 4th round was when Dubois started to look really tired. It looked like Miller was starting to take over, but Miller then also got tired, and Dubois did find a second wind and started to box even better than he had done earlier in the fight. I was wondering if maybe it was just nervous energy early on, and maybe as the fight went on, you know, Dubois seemed to kind of realise, hey, this is very much an easy fight if I make it one. Maybe Miller got inside his head, I don't know, with the build-up and stuff. But yeah, the second half of the fight was dominating stuff from Daniel Dubois, and his ring IQ has elevated in front of our eyes, I think. He was absolutely brilliant. I'm over the moon for him. Up to that point, it was definitely performance of the card. Really good performance. I'll give him massive credit. The chin did finally crack. I think Miller was probably hurt for the first time, you know, seriously in that whole fight. He took a lot of massive shots. He's got a fantastic chin, but finally I think the chin did start to crack in that final round. Yeah, he was taking massive shots on the ropes without firing back. Miller did land some great shots early on. But yeah, for me, Daniel Dubois answered a lot of questions there. There was a lot of people that were confidently picking Miller. You were one of them, Eddie. I went with Dubois, and Dubois ends up winning. I think I probably gave Jarrell about 2 rounds over the whole course of the fight, but that was my take. I don't know if you saw it.
No, I didn't see it. But I guess, and I'm not trying to take anything away from Daniel Dubois. I think he done, you know, obviously a great job. I mean, I didn't see it. Obviously, I'm just taking your word for it, Joe. I heard a couple other people say he did really well. And I just think that obviously there was definitely no drugs in the system of Big Baby. So, and I think honestly, to some degree, you know, I mean, I know a lot of people probably throwing that shade anyway. To some degree, obviously, you would think it played a part in his performance, and you know, versus the other performances he had, the shots he would take, as well as what he was able to give back, and how he seemed to get stronger as the fight gone on, even with taking all the punishment for some of these other guys who were big punchers that he faced. And it's just an unfortunate thing that those, the drugs and stuff like that are in the game. But sometimes, in a situation like this, you can kind of see the effects it can have and the benefits. Then when somebody's actually doing it as they're supposed to doing it, they don't have the same edge. Either that, or it could have taken away the fact that, taken away from what his normal abilities would be from taking all those drugs. I mean, I don't know. I don't understand the situation, but he's obviously tested positive before, and obviously didn't want to go through that bout again. And, credit to Daniel Dubois. He done what he's supposed to do. But I was probably that was one of my more confident picks, was that Big Baby was going to be able to get to Dubois eventually. I was thinking, with the weight, the size, and the fact that he seemed to get better in other fights as the fight gone on, that would be, and then like you said, Joe, he was able to take the shots early. But I guess after a while, and there's only so much you can take. And it eventually had, an adverse effect. And ended up getting stopped, so I was kind of surprised by that. But congratulations to Daniel Dubois. He did what he was supposed to do, and eventually got him out of there.
Yeah, he did get him out of there. So that was the end of your parlay right there. It's not the parlay that we bet on, but the parlay that we kind of put together, the mad odds, which I think were like 86-1 for your one. My one was still going at this point. Frank Sanchez over 5.5 rounds, Daniel Dubois to win any method, and Hrgovic rounds 1-6. But then it all came to a crash in the next fight. Arslanbek Makhmudov, huge upset here, huge upset. Why didn't we put this in our parlays, Eddie? Ajit Kabayel, the German in the other corner, now 24-0. A TKO for him. That was 16-1. If you bet Kabayel, 16-1 for the TKO victory. Boy, oh boy, I did not see this one coming at all. Makhmudov, like I say, loses his O. He's now 18-1. It was for the NABF and WBA Intercontinental Heavyweight titles. Makhmudov down 3 times in the end. Just completely cannot take body shots. It was shocking. He got in there as he does. He's very, very slow and robotic. He got in there as he does, throws these massive shots. But if you're not there for them shots early on, he gasses. And especially now we've seen, if you can target the body, it seemed like Kabayel had the perfect game plan. It was just to kind of stick and move, if you like, and yeah, mostly doing lots and lots of moving around the ring, and that's what happened. Makhmudov started to get tired, started to get a bit desperate, started to blow really, really hard after like 2 rounds. Kabayel started going to the body, and Makhmudov took a knee a couple of times, and every time he'd get back up, he'd take like a deep breath, and then again just start swinging crazy shots from the hip in a desperate attempt to catch Kabayel with one of them. Kabayel, to his credit, like I say, I've heard this guy's like a really rich businessman. Aside from boxing, he doesn't really need to box. But when I saw him getting in with Makhmudov, I thought, wow, why would you take a fight this dangerous? You're probably going to get knocked out. This could be life-changing. But I tell you what, the guy is obviously a much smarter man than me, because he's gone out there, been paid a truckload of money, won by stoppage, and all of a sudden he's got himself in the mix now with all the best heavyweights in the world. I'm sure he'll get a massive fight next. I was so blown away. I really thought Makhmudov would stop him. I just thought the sheer size of Makhmudov and the punching power would get him through, and if not, then he'd probably win on points. His gas tank was so poor here. We've seen him go the distance against Carlos Takam, and I thought Takam probably did enough in that fight there, despite all the knockdowns that Takam suffered. But he paced himself badly in that fight, but nowhere near as badly here. This was seriously worrying, and I don't know what happens next for him. Also on the card, Jai Opatai in a bit of a mismatch. We said it, everyone kind of knew it was a big mismatch. He's now 24-0, a KO in the very first round against Ellis Zorro, who's now 17-1. I hope he's okay. I'm happy that he didn't take loads and loads of punishment. He just got stopped with one punch, and it was I think it was a big long looping left hook that he got caught with right as the round was about to end. They'd already done the 10-second clapper. He gets hit with this shot, and he kind of fell. His head fell on the bottom rope, and he didn't know where he was. The referee, of course, waved it off straight away, took the gum shield out his mouth. So, yeah, brutal performance there from Opatai, and it just goes to show, he didn't mess around. He went in there and did what he expected himself to do. Also on the card, Dmitry Bivol, very disappointing in my opinion. He's now 22-0, a unanimous decision over 12 rounds against Lyndon Arthur, friend of the show, now 23-2. I expected Bivol to get the stoppage. He did have Lyndon down in round 11 from a body shot, but Lyndon kind of got saved by the bell there, and then Bivol didn't really press anything too much in round 12. It was for the WBA Super and IBO World Light Heavyweight titles. Yeah, Bivol's just such a brilliant fighter. I know he was coming off a bit of a layoff, but such a brilliant technical fighter. But no real urgency, no, I don't want to say killer instinct, but he just doesn't care about going a distance. And I know that he'd gone 5 years without getting a stoppage, but yeah, I expected more from him. Lyndon Arthur only had a few weeks' notice for the fight. He went in carrying an injury. They said after the fight that he was seen the other day, a couple weeks ago, he was hobbling around. He could barely walk. I expected Bivol to really, 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 dominate Arthur and get him out of there. He did win every round. I think the scorecards in the end were 120 to 107, all three, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, it was really poor from Bivol. I really, really expected more. And I feel like if he wanted to get him out of there, he could have done. And that's what's frustrating about it. Obviously, I picked Bivol to win by KO. Eddie went with Bivol points. Eddie picked that one right. But yeah, very poor from Bivol in the end. I didn't like it. Eddie, was you going to say something because you've unmuted a few times?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just watching Bivol over his career and paying attention to detail and some of the things. You could just tell he's the kind of guy who, I don't want to say he fights to the caliber of his opponent necessarily. I think he fights to win every time out, and he's not going to take any unnecessary risk. And I think that's with him and Canelo. That's what made him look so good in the fight with Canelo, because Canelo was always going to come and get it. But with this guy, like you said, he was nursing an injury. He wasn't expected to do very much. You expected him to get stopped. A lot of people probably expected him to get stopped. And in these kind of fights with a guy who's just wants to win, doesn't really care how much work or how good necessarily that it looks. It's just the most important part is the win. This is what you get. And most times that's why, and a guy you would think, oh, he's going to go get the stoppage. It may be a guy who's not necessarily world class. He would get the stoppage and that's if he really went after it. But I just don't think that's his style to go after it. And I think that's why the fight was going. And that's why I picked him. I just, certain things you have a sixth sense about with fighters, and you kind of see the flow and how they move and, what's important to them within the fight. And sometimes I even look at myself, and there's opportunities that I had to, maybe make it more exciting or go after the knockout. And early in my career, I did that and made a mistake, and ended up not looking so good, got a little tired. So then you get away from it. And I think Bivol is, his IQ and his understanding of what's necessary sometimes prohibits him from doing what most people expected him to do. So yeah, I mean, maybe not the best performance, but I could just imagine that he did what was necessary to win, and he didn't leave anything up to chance. And unfortunately, that's not necessarily a fan-friendly type of way to think, but that's the way he obviously operates.
Yeah, like I say, all the best to him. It should be noted that Arthur was very, very negative as well, to be honest. Right, moving up to the two main fights. Deontay Wilder now 43-3 with a draw. A unanimous decision over 12 rounds in favour of Joseph Parker, now 34-3. It was for the WBO Intercontinental and WBC International Heavyweight titles. I tell you what a brilliant performance from Joseph Parker. It just goes to show the guy is a completely different fighter under his new trainer, Andy Lee. We both picked this fight. Obviously, you actually went with Wilder KO. I said that the fight's just not going to go the distance. I thought that Joseph Parker, has a chance to hurt Wilder and possibly get him out, but more than likely Wilder was going to get the stoppage, as he always does. He's put everyone he's faced on their backside up until now. Yeah, Joseph was fantastic. It seemed like every time Wilder would let the right hand go, Joseph would get about a 2-second, 2-second warning it was coming. He'd duck underneath it every single time. Wilder would throw it straight over his back. Parker was unbelievable. The jab was fantastic at times when they were meeting in the middle and jabbing each other. Parker had more oomph on his jab, if you like. He was out jabbing Wilder, out fighting Wilder, much more volume to his game. moving around as well. I really liked what I saw from Parker. He seemed to be very light on his feet the last few fights. And again, I put this down to Andy Lee's training. I think sometimes Parker would stay in the pocket and trade, and it would be a bit of a tough man contest, and you obviously could have never fought Wilder like that. But we've seen a bit of a development recently in his last few fights where he's not that guy now. He's not just trying to out-tough you. He's actually thinking what he's doing in there. But I never thought that he'd be able to think his way through 12 rounds without getting hit or hurt at all, and he boxed brilliantly. I must say, when Wilder tried to come on strong in the last couple of rounds, I was worried because Parker was very, very, very tired. You could see he was clinging on in round 12, just trying to get to the decision. Wilder started celebrating, which was quite strange, but so dominant from Parker. You did say, Eddie, if Parker's to win, he's going to win on points, but obviously you picked Wilder by KO, but I just can't put into words how happy I am for Joe Parker. Like I say, he's a fantastic human being, and it's a massive upset, man, but I'm so pleased. Like, I am so happy for Parker. What a fantastic end to a fantastic year he's had. He's had 4 fights this year, 4-0, and this is the cherry on top of the cake. I mean, he fought to a punch perfect game plan, and I cannot applaud him enough. Sensational.
Yeah. I mean, he did. Honestly, Joe, he did what I would expect him to do if he was going to win. It's incredible. The kind of respect that Wilder's right hand, it just puts, fear in most guys, or in most, like, if I'm in the corner, if I'm in Joe's corner, I'm like, what the hell, man? Every time he launches that mother, I would be like, what's going on? I hope he doesn't land it. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. But what I noticed with Joseph Parker in this fight, he was extremely comfortable and relaxed. He didn't really at any time seem overly bothered, right, by, the right hand that much. In fact, every single time, I think, not every time, but most of the time when Wilder threw it, he made it a point to go after it. You understand what I'm saying? Well, he made it like every time you throw that right hand, I'm going to make you pay for it. You understand what I'm saying? It was like a thing where if you use it, I'm going to hurt you type of thing. And it made him, it's like, remember, I think we talked about this too when Tyson was going to fight Wilder, and I said after the first fight he realized that it's important to, what I say, attack. What I mean by what I'm saying is attack the right hand. What I mean by that is every single time he uses it, go after it. Make him leery of literally throwing his best weapon. And I think that's what Joseph Parker was trying to do. I think, though, a lot of it, and I'm not trying to blame Malik or say Malik is not a good trainer or this and that. I just think his application of what he's trying to do with Wilder, I think Wilder coming in extra light, played a part as well. But I think him trying to box when that's really not his game per se. Like, he's looking for range to land his right hand, but him boxing and moving, using angles and things like that, trying to box, like having that cute style, that's not really Wilder's game. Wilder doesn't have that, conventional type boxing style. And I think that's partly what made him such a difficult puzzle to solve for most people. And, by Malik coming in, showing him these conventional moves and these little tricky things, I think that also played a part in him and his game plan, thinking that, I'm behind my jab, when you're really only throwing like 3 or 4 punches, meaningful shots around, and you throw the right hand once or twice, and it's like, what got you here was that big right hand. The one thing that they should have been really concentrated on is more ways to bring that right hand into the fold. Make his right uppercut more potent. Make him utilize other shots with it. Right hooks, and dare I say overhand rights, not necessarily overhand rights because he's fighting a shorter guy, but I just think that, some of the ideas that Malik had were well intended, but I think for a guy like Deontay Wilder, it's not going to be applied properly. You're not in a pressure situation. And to be quite honest, Joe Parker had the performance of his career in a situation where this was probably the most difficult, nerve-wracking fight of his career. Even though I think he's had tougher fights, and obviously he got stopped by Big Joe, a while back. But I think Joseph Parker, the sky's the limit now for him. I don't get overconfident from this. You know what I mean? Continue to work, continue to improve, and but there is definitely a huge benefit to what's happened. The performance was awesome. He took care. When it came to being defensively responsible from that right hand, it was all around good performance, and I think Wilder helped it by not using what got him to the dance. You know what I'm saying? I think he needs to really go back to the drawing board, and they really need to reevaluate what it is they're trying to do in the fights coming.
Yeah, I remember after the first 4 rounds, I had it 4-0 for Parker. And I was thinking, that doesn't mean anything though, because there's been so many fights where I've had the other guy 4-0 up against Wilder, but he always lands that right hand at some point. It's just a matter of when. But yeah, credit to Parker, man, for being able to read everything. You mentioned there, obviously, the boxing skills maybe just not going to be able to be applied properly to Wilder's style. He's got that natural freak power. I think you're right about that, to be honest. As for Parker, though, tearing up the script, obviously the plan was Joshua beats Wallin, Wilder beats Parker, and then we see finally Joshua Wilder in 2024. It just seems like for some reason that fight just can't happen. It seems like when they're both at the table, both signed on the dotted line, even this, something's happened like this to upset the plans. I saw a couple people mention, wouldn't it be great to see a rematch between Joshua and Parker, by the way? I would love that, and I would favour Joseph Parker in that fight 100%. But anyway, fantastic from Parker. Let's not carry on too much more with this fight here. It's took up enough time, but it didn't look like Wilder really was interested in even carrying on boxing straight after the fight. Seemed a bit disinterested. I think now he's kind of got his act together. I think, someone's whispered in his ear like, whoa, there's still millions to be made. What are you talking about? You can't walk away. And now he's done a bit of a U-turn, saying he's definitely going to fight again. But yeah, it's mad because now, most people, based off the two guys' performances the other night, I think most people probably will now favour Joshua going into this fight if they do end up having it next. But anyway, getting to the man we've spoken about a couple times there, Anthony Joshua, now 27-3. We both picked Otto Wallin to win this. I just had a feeling he'd win it. You did as well, Eddie. What I didn't think would happen was a first half of the fight stoppage. He finally gets it, Anthony Joshua. It was 7 years to the month since the last time he got a stoppage in the first half of a fight. He gets it here. Otto Wallin didn't come out for round 6, so a round 5 retirement. Wallin now 26-2. Joshua has clearly done a much better job on him than Tyson Fury did. Very impressed with Joshua. Again, a lot of people saying, is it the old Joshua? Is he back? A lot of people are saying Ben Davison deserves a lot of credit in the corner with him. He's new, it's his new trainer. I don't know. It's hard to tell really based off that one performance, but he was really good. And what's his name? Richie Woodall on the commentary here in the UK. He made a good point. He said, Joshua's going to be very confident getting in there with Wallin tonight. He beat him twice as an amateur. He's very, he's very familiar with Wallin. He won't have all these nerves. He'll be very comfortable, very confident. And I thought, I think he's hit the nail on the head. If that is going to be the case, then Joshua may look really good here. But I still thought Wallin was going to be able at some point to get into a bit of a boxing groove. Obviously got a good chin, took some big shots. But Joshua's jab was fantastic the other night. Really fantastic. Probably the best I've seen his jab now for a few years. Everything was really good. He was light on his feet. I liked the way he was cutting off the ring on Wallin. you know, he didn't show him loads and loads of respect like I think sometimes he's done in previous fights with other men. I think sometimes there's too much respect there, too much hesitancy from him. And this was not that, you know. He just let his hands go and looked really, really good. And that is the best Joshua, in my opinion, has looked for several years. It may have just been that he was really confident against Wallin, or it may just be that we're seeing a man who has done whatever he's had to do away from the ring, and now he's back and he's better than he's been in previous years. So I don't know whether to say it's just a new and improved Joshua or it's the old Joshua. Is it the old? Is it the new? I'm not entirely sure. But what did you make of the performance, Eddie? There's no doubting that it was a really, really good showing from Joshua there.
Yeah, 100%. You know, I mean, when I saw what was going on, I mean, I was watching, waiting to see when, Wallin. And the funny thing is, I don't know why this has happened to me a couple of times too. Whenever I'm watching, I don't know how this happens, but I'm like ahead, or no, I'm behind. Like that happened with the Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford fight. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And then the commentary went out for a second. And I'm like, what? And the sound in general just went out. And I'm like, what the hell? But then, I moved it up a little bit, got past that little issue. And it was just like Joshua was dominating and kept in control. And, he seemed like his punches and his intent, he was menacing. Like everything he threw had meaning to it. You know what I mean? And the performance that he gave was the kind of performance that, in my opinion, he needed against Usyk. Not fighting to get to the end, not trying to box, not trying to keep necessarily this guy at range and fight him in a boxing match. He should have been going in there, and everything he was throwing was, we're not saying going out there and just winging and throwing wild shots, but just have a different attitude towards it. You understand what I'm saying? Throw shots with meaning. And make sure that every single time the punch touches him, or every time a punch gets in range, that it makes him feel, hey, I'm going to be in a fight tonight. And I think in this fight is exactly what he gave. Now, we talked about, and like you said, one of the guys from the UK, the announcer said, he's probably going to be a little bit more confident. He's been... Obviously, he's been in the ring with Wallin before, and they sparred and all of that. So he would expect a good performance because he was a little more comfortable. And if that's the case, that's great. That's a great call. Plus, obviously, it's a good situation for Joshua. But for the future, this is the kind of Joshua that needs to be in there. If he was to ever face Usyk again or anybody like that, he's going to have to come in there with that kind of mentality. He's going to have to use the body that he has, the size, the strength, in the athletic ability. He's going to have to put that to if he was to fight Wilder. To be quite honest, most people, yes, are going to favor Joshua in that fight because of how Wilder looked. But remember, styles make fights, and triangle theories don't necessarily work in boxing. And even though Wilder looked not so great, what he obviously what he was doing in the fight, and in general, just, didn't look like we expected, and Joshua did. He actually looked good. Don't think that it's impossible for for Wilder to go in if they were to fight and to have success and maybe win. But just looking at the situation, while Joshua would have to approach that fight honestly, obviously more skilled, and have to be extremely defensively responsible, but he still would have to have that same menacing venom thrown with his punches. You know what I mean? And not necessarily, even with a Wilder, necessarily try to per se outbox him. You know what I mean? He's going to have the weight advantage, the size advantage, and probably the strength advantage. Go in there and seek and destroy. However, just make sure you stay leery, obviously, of the right hand. But all in all, I don't want to go too crazy, but all in all, Joshua, I thought, did a hell of a job. He looked like what you would expect a high-level fighter, one of the best in the world, to look like in a situation like this. He's supposed to be able to separate himself, and that's what he did. And, this is what I'm pretty sure guys and people in the UK to support him, people all over the world that support him, want to see from him. And if he gives this kind of performance, or at least gives this kind of effort, even in a loss, we can respect that. You know what I mean? And like I said, if he was ever to face Usyk again, this is the version that he would need. That would need to be in there with Usyk, and he would have to go in with the idea of, I'm not going the distance. And if he did that, he may have more success. Shit, he may get outboxed, but at least he would have an opportunity to go out there and do what he has to do to win. So all in all, great performance by him, and hope to see this kind of performance again.
Hope to see this kind of performance again. There we go. I second that. Moving now to the Suamlam Night Bazaar in Bangkok, Thailand. Over here, Eddie, you've got a little warning. Wisaksa Wangek, a.k.a. Sarisaket Saw Rungvasai, a.k.a.
the Rat Eater.
There we go, baby. There we go. He's back with a bang. Well, not much of a bang. He's 55-6 with a draw. He went the distance here, won unanimously over 6 rounds against the guy who had no wins. The guy's now 0-2. Kritifak Dwangnut. So yeah, all the best there to Wangek. Hopefully celebrates with another rat of his choice. Moving now to the final card to mention of the review party. Went down at the Ariake Arena on Tuesday, Boxing Day, in Tokyo, Japan. It was live on ESPN+. It was live on Sky Sports. Over here, Naoya Inoue successfully unified. He's now the undisputed super bantamweight world champion, IBF, WBA, WBC, WBO. He's now 26-0, still undefeated. And yeah, the KO came for him in round 10 against Marlon Tapales, who's now 37-4. Funny that a lot of people are criticising Inoue because it took him longer than they expected. I actually thought he would probably, be able to get him out a bit earlier than expected. But very, very, very good performance against obviously a good champion in Tapales, who was coming off a great win, probably one of the best wins that he'd had in recent years. So there was a lot of confidence. Credit to him as well, getting straight in with Inoue and going to Japan for the fight. But Inoue is just fantastic. Obviously, he's in the conversation for Fighter of the Year. We'll get to that in part 2. But yeah, sensational fighter. You could see that the spite on his shots and the shot selection as well. Like, he doesn't need much room to get, to generate power on shots, whether it's a hook or an uppercut or, whatever, a straight shot. He just needs an inch of space and he gets some good power on it. You could see sometimes where he saw that Tapales looked a bit fresh, and sometimes, Tapales would start an attack. Inoue would take a step back, then jump back into range, got good footwork. So yeah, he hurt Tapales. I think I can't remember when it was now. I'm pretty sure Tapales went down at some point, I want to say from a body shot. I think it was, Jesus Christ, it was round 4. Yeah, he went down in round 4, I believe, from a body shot. Then the bell goes, saves him before Inoue can jump on him. But yeah, obviously it went a few more rounds after that. Credit to Tapales for that toughness. Landed some good shots himself. But no, Inoue, dominated a world champion here, and I don't want to criticise him at all, really. I think he probably won most of the rounds, obviously. He might have given up 1 or 2 along the way, but yeah, he was fully in control and, dominated a good champion there once again. You can't really ask for more from Inoue. He does consistently deliver knockout wins. Eddie, you unpaused or you unmuted a few times. I'm guessing you didn't see it, but are you going to surprise me?
No, I didn't get a chance to actually see it. I tried to watch it. For some reason, I couldn't get it, and I couldn't. I wasn't able to get that. Although I was able to see the one with him and Scooter, but and I was literally doing that, like peeking at it because I was in the middle of working. But I wanted to see this one, and I tried to watch it before today. But once again, working, and it was the replay, so I just really didn't have a chance.
It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, but anyway, I just gonna say this real quick because I heard you say something about most people was expecting them to get out early, but this is just boxing is a very, very difficult sport, and I understand this is what we expect on paper, And sometimes these guys, do what we expect and, kind of spoil us with performances and the skills and the power and all that. But remember, this is a fight, and, things aren't promised, and, people can die in there. So to be, down on his performance per se, because I'm pretty sure there's some people say, oh, you should have got him out of it earlier. Oh, this guy wasn't this. He's a champion, had 2 belts or 1 belt, whatever he had. He's still a champion. He had a great win. He's a good, high-level fighter, one of the best in the world. And to complain or to have something to say about the performance because he didn't stop him in the round you expected or that anyone expected is just like, wow to me. It's like, is this really what we are? And it goes beyond this. It goes to, like, in other sports, you know what I mean? Let's talk about, regular guys who talk about other athletes like, oh, he's not this, he's not that. And I'm like, yo, this guy is a professional athlete at the highest level. You're talking about him. He's a pro, and people are just still got these things to say about him. And I'm like, damn, is there ever going to be a time where we really just respect the athlete and what they have to go through to get to the point that they are and just say, okay, well, it happens, you know what I mean? They're great. You know what I mean? There's other great fighters or other great basketball players or football players out there. You can't just expect that every single time you want something to happen that it should happen. If it doesn't, they ain't shit no more. And I think that's something I can't get behind, because I really respect all athletes, even the ones who, of course, don't follow, live up to what they're supposed to. But at the end of the day, that just shows how difficult sports is in general to make it in.
Yeah, absolutely, Eddie, absolutely. But anyway, that brings part 1 to a close. It's now time to welcome this week's special guest. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the former IBF, WBC and WBO Super Welterweight World Champion and reigning IBF Welterweight World Champion. It is, of course, Miss Natasha Jonas. Natasha, welcome back on the show.
Nice one, thank you for having me.
Hey, it's my pleasure as always. So firstly, it's only right by asking, how was your Christmas, Tasha?
It was good, yeah. It was a scale down from what it normally is, but I can't be a Grinch. I'm a mum as well, so yeah, we had a good one.
Excellent. So yeah, Tasha, we last spoke back in June. It was fight week for the Candy Wyatt fight. Another win, another stoppage. Just give us a brief review of that win, briefly.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I think, a fight I was expected to win, if I'm honest. I knew she'd be tough. I knew she'd be quite game, but I also knew she was able to get hit, and I nearly got out in the first round, and I had to calm myself and then just take it in my stride.
And I remember last time we spoke, you were kind of saying, 147 is going to be much better for you than 154, even though you were unified at 154. Obviously, we spoke on the week of the fight. You were making weight. You obviously made weight in the end. Was that the case? You felt that was a much better weight for yourself?
Yeah, I don't struggle to make one. I think even at 154, I was weighing in at 148, 149. So it's no different of a camp. I think coming from them lower weights helps. But yeah, it's just one of them things. Your body can make any weight it wants. It's about performing at it, and I think I'm definitely more comfortable at the higher weights.
And last time we spoke, I remember bringing up the fact that your trainer Joe Gallagher had stated he felt you should retire after the Wyatt fight was over. Obviously, you haven't done that. Do you have a long-term goal or vision, Natasha, or is it just like fight by fight at this point?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a bit of fight by fight. I do have, aspirations of there's still things I want to do with boxing before I call it a day, but I also know, the person that you have to be in camp, and more mentally than physically. Like physically, your body can do anything it wants, but that it's the mental thing of camp that I believe I've only got a few of them left in me. I don't want to keep on having to be that person.
No, that makes sense. But there we go. The gravy train continues. The next stop is January 20th at the Echo Arena back at home. You'll be defending the IBF title against America's Mikaela Mayer. Natasha, firstly, you guys have both done lots of pundit work for Sky in the past. or I was going to say, do you, or maybe did you, have a friendly working relationship with Mikaela or not?
Yeah, I mean, we've never had an issue. We potentially could have met at super featherweight, but it's one of them things. I've got no problems with anyone in boxing.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And as you say there, Mikaela being at 130 in the past, she did her best work there. She says she's felt great since moving up to 140. Obviously, as we know, it's at 147 this fight. Are you expecting a fitter, stronger Mayer than perhaps we've ever seen?
Maybe not so much fitter in the sense of output, but definitely stronger. And like I say, I've been there myself. When you've got that, that when your camp is not about making weight, there's a lot of stress that takes out off you, and you can focus then on the tactical side a bit more than you normally would. So yeah, I probably agree with her. And yeah, she's just the difference though is that you've got to be able to carry that weight and perform at it. I don't think she'll be able to do what she did at super feather at this weight, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I was going to ask as well, how do you actually see this fight playing out? Obviously, I think the weight is more in your favour, but at the same time, her one loss against Baumgardner was highly disputed and maybe shouldn't even exist.
Yeah, I believe personally that she won that fight, and I think I was on the part of the commentary team that night. I thought she was unfortunate not to get the nod. But yeah, I think she's a good fighter. I think, she's had a good amateur career. The basics are very good. She's got a good shot selection, good work rate. But I just think that everything that she does, I'm better.
And you probably knew at some point I was going to bring this up, but the BBC Sports Personality of the Year, the seating arrangement, for those that don't know, you were sat next to long-term rival Terri Harper. How awkward was that?
I mean, she made out a big thing on social media and she had a lot to say, but she was sitting next to me for 2 hours and didn't say anything. So that says it all. I mean, I think sometimes it's just a bit of banter and back and forth, but I'm not really into all that. I'm not really into making a show for people on social media unless I believe that I'm right. So I've got, she asked me a question, I answered it, and then she didn't talk, and I've got nothing to say to her. I'm not going to start conversating with her. I've got nothing to say to her.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, Terri took to social media, made it blow up. You dropped the generational gap line, which I thought was a mic drop moment.
I'm not a two-faced person. I'm not going to sit there conversating with you. I've got nothing to say. You seem to have a lot to say on social media, but when you're sitting next to me, you didn't have nothing to say. So, I'm not going to instigate a conversation with someone I've got no intentions of talking to. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I get it. And yeah, you're probably right. I know that you already have a fight announced, but there's a tradition on this podcast. Everyone that we interview in the month of December every year, I like to ask what's on their Christmas wish list in a realistic world for the next year. So like I say, you've got the Mayer fight to take care of first. But what else do you want the year to bring you?
Oh, gosh, a lot. I would love to be in the conversation for the Katie fight, but, you have to concentrate on just what's in front of you, because you know what boxing's like. You don't get the whole Wilder at the weekend. You get one bad. I'm not a bad decision, Parker won clearly, but one decision doesn't go your way, and all them opportunities and doors that were open quickly closed. So I just focus on what's in front of me, and then keep them options open when you get the result, and then go for the best one. That's for me.
No, absolutely. And yeah, we've kind of whizzed through pretty much everything, Tasha. Just before we wrap it up, I want to ask if you've got any closing words just to the listeners. You're going to be the last guest of the year. We won't interview anyone else now till next year. If you want to just sign out with a little message before we go, you can say whatever you like before we let you go, Tash.
Oh gosh, no pressure. Thank you for the support. That's to you as well. Thanks for putting us in a positive light always. Wishing everyone, I hope you had a good Christmas, have a great New Year, and I hope everything, the year is filled with love, no regrets, and happiness. And I wish everyone the best, and thank you for support. And that's me signing out.
There we go. Well said. Listen, Tasha, as always, the pleasure's mine. Thank you so much for your time. I want to wish you a happy new year, and we'll speak after the fight sometime.
Oh, cheers. Thank you.
Okay, now it's time for part 2 on this week's show. This part, of course, the news part of the show. We're going to start here with this one. Conor Benn will return to the ring in back-to-back American fights. This one will take place at the Cosmopolitan of Las Vegas. He gets in with the undefeated Peter Dobson. That one to go down February the 3rd, live on DAZN. It's going to be early afternoon Las Vegas time, so it's basically prime time, in the UK. So it's going to be an early one there. A lot of people never heard of Peter Dobson. Had to go and have a little look. I was one. I know a hell of a lot of boxers' names, but it wasn't one that rang a bell to me. I went and had a look. And Dobson's 16-0 with 9 KOs. But yeah, I couldn't tell you too much about the guy. Also on that card as well, we're going to see Austin Ammo Williams get in there with Connor Coyle. And Johnny Fisher as well on the undercard. No opponent just yet for him. So that's that. Also, in other news, another Matchroom boxing piece of news. Lewis Crocker will be fighting on January the 27th. That one to go down, I believe, in Belfast. It's going to be live on DAZN. He gets in with Jose Felix of Mexico. All the best there to Lewis Crocker. Yep, that is in Belfast. The New Forge Sports Complex. Also on that card as well, the return to the ring for the very talented Paddy Donovan. Also Sean McComb. And a couple of other names there. That is it, though, for the news. Moving now to the very, very short preview part of the show. This one goes down, just one card to mention. It goes down at the Ota City General Gymnasium in Tokyo, Japan. It goes down on Sunday, December the 31st, so New Year's Eve. We're going to see in Japan Kazuto Ioka, 30-2 with a draw, defending his WBA super flyweight world title against Josba Perez, who's 20-3. I think that will be Ioka's first time boxing, I believe, since beating Joshua Franco, if I'm not mistaken. And also on the undercard, we're going to see the very fun to watch Daigo Higa, 20-2 with a draw. He gets in with Navapon Kaikana, who is 58-3 with a draw. Very much a padded record there, but I don't expect that fight to go the distance both men can crack. And I don't think both men have the best of chins, so that could be interesting over 10 rounds there at bantamweight. That's it, though. So now we move, that's it for the preview part. Now we move to the awards ceremony. Like I say, this is going to be quite fun, quite different, and we do this at the end of the year, every year on the podcast. So this will be the 8th end of year special, as far as I'm aware. I think I'm counting that right, but yeah, we like to do this bit because it's fun. We usually kind of get through the categories quite speedy, but we take a little look, and obviously I've got my picks as well. Eddie, I'm guessing you probably didn't get any picks, but I'm sure you're going to chime in at some point. We've asked the listeners and also asked our followers on social media to send in their suggestions, and I'm going to read some of those out. The categories we've decided to go with in the end was Fighter of the Year, Young Fighter of the Year, under 25 or 25, so that could be 25 and under. Fight of the Year, Knockout of the Year, Upset of the Year, Female Fighter of the Year, and I think that is it. I might have done one or two other little categories that I decided not to kind of ask for anyone's input on. I think we did away with Prospect of the Year after we did say send in your Prospect of the Year, and people did, but we decided to bin that one off. And Trainer of the Year as well we didn't bother with, but we are going with Fight of the Year, KO of the Year, Fighter of the Year, Young Fighter of the Year, British Fighter of the Year, Upset of the Year, and Female Fighter of the Year. So I'm going to start with the listeners here, and we're going to start with the first segment, or first category will be Fighter of the Year, plain and simple, Eddie. Right, so we've got a few people that sent these in. We're going to start here with Mr. SP on Twitter. He says Crawford. Asgi as well says Crawford. Gary Smith says Crawford. Asgi also goes with Jaron Ennis, so he's put Crawford and Ennis there. Boom Shop as well has gone with Jaron Ennis. We've got Terry Mack who's gone with Inoue. Tuba TJ's gone with Inoue. Boxing Vibe has gone with Inoue. Zilly Zhang is an interesting shout there from Dan Middlemass. David Benavidez from Ryan B Boxing. Donovan Casp has sent 4 in. He says Inoue, Crawford, Haney and David Benavidez. Anthony Callie says Benavidez or Crawford. I'm going to try to whiz through some of those little picks there. Obviously, Crawford was a popular shout. The only reason I'm not giving it to Crawford is because Crawford only had the one fight all year. It was against Errol Spence, a guy who, for me, this is going to be very harsh. And if you've listened before, you're not going to be surprised to hear me say it. I think Spence was very, very overrated. So I expected Bud to beat him all day long. And therefore, to beat just him all year long, you're not going to make Fighter of the Year, in my opinion. Jaron Ennis is an interesting one. I was surprised to see 2 people go with him. I can't completely remember the year he's had, so I do just want to take a little look. Obviously, he's currently 31-0. He's had 2 fights this year. That unanimous decision against Karen Chakadzian, which I didn't think he was very impressive in, and then the knockout last time against Roman Villa back in July. Yeah, I'm not going to be giving him Fighter of the Year. Inoue, of course, is a huge, huge shout, and he's certainly on my shortlist. But yeah, he's not my favourite Fighter of the Year, unfortunately. So yeah, that's a close one. But I can understand why people are sending that in. He beat Stephen Fulton, took his O, stopped him. And then obviously, very fresh in our memories, we spoke about it on part 1. He knocked out Marlon Tapales in the 10th round. So 2 wins, 2 knockout wins, and he's become undisputed to wrap the year up. And obviously took Stephen Fulton's O, like I say. And yeah, he's had a fantastic year. He's had a really, really, really good year. But for me, not my winner. Zilly Zhang for Dan Middlemass, that's a really good one as well. I just love the really strange shouts. I mean, Zilly Zhang, let's be honest, he's certainly not going to be Fighter of the Year, but I like the shout. Obviously, I was there at the second Joyce fight. His 2 wins this year have both been knockouts against the same man, Joe Joyce. 6 rounds and then 3 rounds. Like I say, I was at the second one. It was crazy, but not my Fighter of the Year. My Fighter of the Year is one that was sent in by Ryan B Boxing. Also, Donovan Casp was a guy that mentioned it amongst the 4 that he sent in, and Anthony Callie mentioned him or Crawford. And that, for me, my Fighter of the Year is David Benavidez, and the reason he gets it is because he had 2 solid wins this year. He beat Caleb Plant on points, where he really dominated him throughout that fight. And obviously, most recently, stopping Demetrius Andrade, taking his O. A lot of people felt Andrade could have won that fight. You were one of them, Eddie. He's had a brilliant year, Benavidez. My second place definitely goes to Inoue, just simply because of the 2 wins that he had. Obviously, to take the O away from Stephen Fulton. Again, a lot of people felt that he could do things there against Inoue. They were wrong. He got stopped and he lost his O. And then to close the year out by becoming undisputed is just a hell of an achievement. Undisputed again in a second weight class in very, very little time. So yeah, he gets number 2. Number 3 for me, and this is I'm the guy that creates the criteria here, and that's why he's going in at number 3. I think he deserves to be at number 3, mainly for one fantastic win just the other day, but also the fact that he's had 4 fights this year, winning all 4, and that man is Mr. Joseph Parker. He's had a really, really, really busy year. He's been here, there, and everywhere. He's boxed in England, he's boxed in Australia, and then twice in Saudi Arabia. He's been incredibly busy flying back to New Zealand as well in between, up to Ireland to train with Andy Lee. He's been here, there and everywhere. A win at the start of the year against Jack Massey, in which I wasn't that impressed with him. I thought he was a bit average that night. But since then, good win back in Australia. I say back in Australia, he's from New Zealand, but a good win in Australia. First round knockout against Faiga Opelu. He looked fantastic against Simon Keane, knocked him out in 3 rounds. And then that win just the other day against Deontay Wilder, for me, puts him in the conversation. One of the best 2023s of any fighter in the world, in my opinion. 4 wins, and obviously the last win of all was a real huge upset win against Wilder. He's looking fantastic under Andy Lee. And then in 4th spot, I don't usually do a 4th, but I'm going to give it to Gervonta Tank Davis simply because I think he's had a decent year. Hasn't really been mentioned, but he's beaten up 2 Garcias this year. Obviously, the first being Hector Luis Garcia, managed to take his O, and then obviously come back and beat Ryan Garcia, managed to stop him. Well, he's managed to stop both of them. I think he's had a good year. I feel like the Hector Luis Garcia one, I don't want to take anything away from Garcia, but we've seen him lose to Lamont Roach. I like Lamont Roach, but I don't think he was that great of a fighter, but that was a good win for Gervonta. And then, like I say, the Garcia one was really an exciting fight, and I was buzzing for that fight, and he looked really good there, Gervonta. So he's had a good year. It's mad to think that Ryan Garcia fight was 8 months ago now. Nothing seems to be lined up just yet for Gervonta. But anyway, that's my top 4 fighters of the year. Eddie, did you want to add anything to that before we move on to the next segment, which will be young fighter 25 and under of the year?
Yeah. I actually like your picks, Joe. I know a lot of people would have said Terrence Crawford was definitely, in most people's eyes, because of the big win with Errol Spence. And I understand why you said you didn't think so. You know what I mean? I understand that sentiment. It's not with me. I don't think it's because I thought that he would always beat him. I thought that Spence would have, a better showing and be better prepared. I just didn't think he was the Spence that I remember seeing in general. So, I still think that's a huge win just from the name value. That puts him in the conversation. But I do think Inoue is probably going to, will get the fighter of the year, being that he won in the fashion that most people would want to win. And then he also was undisputed by the end of the year, winning another knockout. You know what I mean? David Benavidez, I understand, you get, that being the guy that you would choose because of the caliber of guys he faced. But once again, you have to remember that Inoue was fighting champions and dominated and stopped both of them. Took the O from one of them, one very promising fighter, and did it in a dominating fashion. So for me, if I was to pick a number 1, it would be Inoue. But David Benavidez is definitely in the conversation of that. If I want to say 1A, 1B, I would say that, or just give him the number 2 spot. I like the Joseph Parker one. Honestly, I'm not going to lie, Joe, I didn't even think of that. But definitely that's a good, I guess some of the other fighters he fought, you can kind of, because you don't really know them and they're not, huge name guys, but the Wilder win is huge. Huge across the board. I don't know if there's a bigger win, considering, his position as a fighter, how he upset the odds and all. It's just, that's a huge one. Trying to think of the other ones you mentioned. See, Zhang, I like that. I just like Zhang. He's a good dude, a good fighter. So, I would like to think that, he would even be in the conversation, with this. But, he's definitely a fun pick to put in there just because he's not the norm or not one that you would pick just off the rip, because he's not he's a top heavyweight, but not one of the big 4. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like you would you would kind of overlook him a little bit, but he's on his way there. So, but yeah, those are good picks. Mine would be, I would give it probably to Inoue first, and then I would go with David Benavidez, then maybe Crawford. Yeah, I think those are the two for me. This right. Third, third I would say Crawford. So yeah, I mean that's good. That's good. I think that's as far as I'm gonna go. I can't think of any other guys that I could put in. I heard the Tank is an interesting pick. It's not a bad pick. I rate Hector Luis Garcia before the first loss. I thought he was a really fantastic fighter too, as well as obviously Ryan Garcia, big name guy, big time fighter. So you gotta you give him that, but I don't know if he would necessarily be in it, but that's a good pick though. But yeah, that's all I got though, Joe.
Okay. Right, we're gonna move straight to Young Fighter of the Year, which I've always done as 25 years and younger. So there is a guy who's 25 years of age. Some people, one person said, oh, I can't put him in because he just turned 25, so I'm going to pick this guy instead. No, it's 25 and under. So that man, I'm going to just come straight to my pick here. He really could have been Fighter of the Year in the top one or two for just plainly Fighter of the Year anyway. So I do want to just reiterate that this guy for me could have been number one or number two Fighter of the Year period, but I moved him to Young Fighter because he is of that age, and I wanted to basically make room for someone else to go in the top 3 or top 4 I ended up doing for Fighter of the Year. So straight to my Young Fighter of the Year has to be Devin Haney. Obviously, the win against Lomachenko earlier this year, very controversial. I actually felt that he lost the fight, but he did win the fight. I mean, his record has got another win from that, so he beat Loma, and obviously he completely dominated the life out of Regis Prograis, and what I thought was going to be a really interesting fight turned out to be completely one-sided. So for me, Haney is my number one Young Fighter of the Year. Number 2 is, I'm giving it to Jesse Bam Rodriguez. Obviously, we have to mention it's a crazy fact that he actually moved down a weight and became a champion there earlier this year. I can't remember who he beat for the title off the top of my head, but then he defended it and obviously unified it with Sonny Edwards and ended up stopping him in what was a really good fight. So that is my 1 and 2. I don't have a third one, but the fans, though, the listeners, they said for Young Fighter of the Year, Mr. SP went with Devin Haney. Ryan B. Boxing went with Xander Zayas. That's an interesting pick. I'd say more of a prospect, but again, we ended up not doing that category. Bam Rodriguez was sent in by Boxing Vibe and Tuba TJ. Like I say, Donovan Casp sent in Haney already for Fighter of the Year, so I'm sure he would have sent him in for Young Fighter there. Keep it brief, Eddie, because we don't want to be here too long, but best fighter 25 and under surely has to be Haney.
Yeah, definitely. Close second is Bam because he did some great things too. Beat Sonny Edwards, which is what crushed me. But yeah, it's got to be Devin Haney. He's done some good things this year in the face of a lot of people kind of, including myself, not necessarily thinking he was going to be as dominant as he was, and then in the fight with which I thought he lost to Lomachenko, but got the win regardless. Yeah, you got to give it to him. He's did awesome this year.
Okay, so the next category is going to be Fight of the Year. It is bad on my part, but I haven't gotten around to watching the Robisi Ramirez fight just yet, so unfortunately that isn't on my list, but I was very surprised to see that no one even nominated it. I'm stunned. But anyway, what the listeners did send in for Fight of the Year, we've had 5 different fights nominated. We've got Mr. SP has actually gone with 2. He's gone with Sonny Edwards against Jesse Bam Rodriguez as his fight of the year. It was a great fight. We did say a couple weeks ago, or last week, whenever it was, Eddie, that there was a mixture of a chess match and also a complete an all-out war in the second half of that fight. He's also gone with Lee Wood against Josh Warrington, another really good fight. I can see why you'd say fight of the year. Warrington was massively dominating it and went in from being the underdog to being the live favourite, and then of course ended up walking onto a shot and getting stopped. That was a crazy turnaround. It was a really good fight. Smelodies OG has sent in Shakur Stevenson against De Los Santos. I'm guessing he must be trolling there. It did make me laugh. We've also been sent in from Ryan B Boxing.
Sorry, Joe. That is cold-blooded. Why did he do that? That was mean. But go ahead. Keep going. I'm sorry.
Ryan B Boxing says Gervonta Tank Davis against Ryan Garcia. It was an exciting fight going in, but the fight itself didn't really live up to the expectations. I don't think Ryan was good enough to make it a great fight. And then the way it ended as well, like it was a bit, it wasn't very satisfactory. Haney versus Lomachenko was sent in as well. That one from Tuba TJ. He's put here, even if I disagree with the decision, it was a close, high-level fight. And Boxing Vibe as well has gone with Haney Lomachenko. That was a great fight, by the way. No one has sent in any of my top 3, so this is going to be interesting. Okay, so my number 1, and it seems now like a long time ago because it has almost been a year. It took place in January. And maybe this is my number 1 because I was there to actually see it. But it's going to be Artur Beterbiev against Anthony Yarde. It was just an unbelievable fight. I remember being there and I remember standing up on my chair. Not sitting on my chair, but standing up for the entire fight. And it was just crazy, like Beterbiev started fast, then Yarde hurt Beterbiev. They were just hurting each other, and it was a brutal fight. Both men, landing serious, powerful shots, and obviously, unfortunately, Yarde was stopped. But it was a great fight and a crazy atmosphere. So that gets my number 1, and no one mentioned that. Number 2, an all-out Mexican war between Emmanuel Navarrete and Oscar Valdez. That was a crazy fight with ebbs and flows. I thought Navarrete was unbelievable in that fight, and Valdez was a lot better than I thought he'd be. That was a real cracker of a fight there. Can't believe no one mentioned that. And also in third place, I'm not really too surprised that no one said this. It's obviously a fight that took place, I think, on an undercard. I think it was in Telford, if I'm not mistaken, but it was on an undercard in the UK, Frank Warren show. Andrew Kane against Iron Baluta. That was an unbelievable fight. Baluta in another fight of the year candidate. Andrew Kane come out, looked really good. I think dropped Baluta early on, then Baluta ended up looking like he was going to be getting stopped and then come back to end up stopping Andrew Kane. It was a crazy fight, that one. And again, if you're listening, you haven't seen that fight, you've got to go and check it out. That was a brilliant fight. And honestly, that fight could have even been number 1. It's just one of those fights. I'm not sure how many people ended up seeing it, especially fight fans across the pond where you are, Eddie. But yeah, all great fights there. I'm going to move on to the next category, knockout of the year here, Eddie. Few interesting ones mentioned as well. And again, I don't know if anyone's mentioned. Oh yeah, no, there has been one on my list, but not the number 1. The number 1 I don't think's been mentioned. But anyway, knockout of the year. Mr. SP is nominated 2 here. He's gone with Lara vs. Wood 1. That was a really good knockout, actually. It was a left hook from Lara, and Lee Wood obviously went down. He walked into the shot, went down. I think the clapper had gone. There was less than 10 seconds in the round, and the towel came in from Ben Davison. That was a crazy turnaround as well. That could have been in my top 3. To be totally honest, I forgot about that one. That could have been in my top 3 if I gave it more thought. That really could have been in my top 3 there. That's a great nomination. Also, Mr. SP has sent in Inoue versus Fulton. Do you know what, Eddie? I can't really remember. And obviously, I watched it. I can't remember the stoppage from Inoue now against Fulton. Do you remember it clearly?
Yeah. It was like he dropped him with a shot, right? And I think he got back up, but then he got caught. I think he got back up, if I'm not mistaken. Or no, he got hit. I think he got rocked. And as he was going back, he got hit with like a leaping left hook or something like that. They caught him, and then he went down, and he was down and out. Like, if you could pull it up on the net, yeah. But I think that's how it played. I think that's how it played out. I remember watching it and watching the replay, like, and feeling bad for Steve, for Scooter.
Yeah. This one was sent in, Eddie, here, and I think you're gonna agree. This one was it was not only a great knockout, but also a crazy shock. Mendoza knocking out the towering Inferno Fundora. That was a crazy knockout. Chris EZUA sent that one in. Do you remember that, Eddie? That was a crazy one.
Yeah, that was crazy. And you know what was crazy about it? The funniest part is, for whatever reason, I was so tired, I was falling asleep. And I remember waking up and I was sitting there. All of a sudden, boom! I was like, oh! And I was watching him get up, that woke me up. So yeah, that's a hell of that was a good nomination. I forgot about that almost though.
Yeah, that is another absolutely brilliant nomination. It's not one that I thought of, but yeah, that was crazy. It was a left hook, and again, these, like, I do love a left hook knockout. That's another one where he got caught and he was still on his feet, but he was completely out of it, and then he gets hit with like one or two more shots on the way down. Yeah, that was brutal. That's a great nomination. Tony Trisket says it's definitely a contender. Nakatani against Andrew Maloney. Yes, that is on my list. That was unbelievable, the way he walked Maloney into that overhand left. That is, and it was obviously in the last round as well. There was only a few seconds to go. I remember betting on Andrew Maloney to go the distance, and then he got knocked out with just a few seconds to go, walking into a shot in round 12. Yeah, that was brutal. I like Andrew Maloney a lot, but that was really brutal, that knockout there. And then this one was very popular. Ryan B Boxing, Tuba TJ, and Boxing Vibe have all gone with Zhang versus Joyce 2. And obviously, like I say, I was at that fight, and the big Chinaman, silenced the entire arena with an unbelievable right hand after dominating Joe in mostly all of the rounds from the first fight to the second fight. Yeah, that certainly was a massive knockout. I don't think I've watched it back on the TV, but where I was sat from my seat, I didn't have the very best of views, but yeah, it was terrible. Like I say, the reaction, it was crazy. You could hear a pin drop the moment that Big Joe hit the canvas there. But anyway, my knockouts of the year, I'm going to start with number 3 and work my way to number 2. Number 3, this one really could have gone, and I could have put Sebastian Fundora's knockout loss to Mendoza in there. I could have put Lara against Lee Wood. It really could have took third spot. But my third spot is actually Joshua against Helenius, and I give Joshua some extra credit because as he was throwing that right hand, as he was throwing it, he gets caught with a jab in the face, but still managed to keep the amount of power in there to knock big Helenius out with a good shot. So yeah, that was a nice right hand, and I think was a good knockout. But now I'm seeing a few of these nominations. I'm not so sure it should still be third, but it's too late to change it. Joshua gets number 3. Number 2 is definitely the Nakatani versus Maloney knockout, which was horrible to watch, but a fantastic knockout. And number 1 for me, once again, it's not one that's been sent in or mentioned, but an unbelievable knockout. Samuel Antwi against Mason Cartwright. If you haven't seen that, the knockout itself is just on YouTube. You can have a look at that. That was a brutal knockout. And off the top of my head, I don't think Antwi's really known as a big puncher, but he looked like one there. And yeah, it was a really good fight up until that point. He was fantastic that night, Samuel Antwi. So for me, he gets my number 1 knockout of the year. Okay, so we've gone for a few categories there. We've gone with fighter, young fighter. We've gone with fight of the year, knockout of the year. 2 categories left, Eddie. We've got upset of the year or female fighter of the year. What we going with? What we going with first?
Let's go upset of the year. I like that.
Okay, upset of the year. Mr. SP sends in Smith versus Eubank. He doesn't specify which one, so I'm going to say it's probably Smith Eubank 1. By the way, that was another contender for, well, maybe not knockout of the year, but that was a really, really unbelievable way that the fight ended, the first fight there. Good nomination. Thanks, Mr. SP. You sent in pretty much a nomination for every category, and also sometimes multiple, because he's actually sent another one here as well. Ramla Ali getting knocked out by Julissa Guzman. That definitely deserves a mention. Ramla Ali obviously come back and avenged that loss very narrowly on points later on in the year, but she was knocked out earlier this year by the Mexican. That's another good one. Ryan B. Boxing says Joyce versus Zhang Wan was a massive upset. I agree. Like I've said so many times, I always felt that Zhang was absolutely to a T, tailor-made for Joe Joyce, and I was stunned when Joyce got stopped. But obviously it was on a cut eye or his eye closed, whatever it was. It was a big upset, yeah, it definitely was, but I felt that there was unfinished business, and I felt that he'd get him in the second fight, which I was very wrong, obviously. We've also had sent in from Boxing Vibe, Carol Itauma getting stopped by Ezekiel Moderna. Again, I was there at that fight. That's a massive upset. Carol Itauma got in there with, obviously, Moderna, who was quite experienced and a decent puncher. Like I say, it was on the Yard Beterbiev undercard. I was there, and what's crazy is after he got stopped, his brother Moses Itauma made his pro debut just a few minutes later. Really crazy scenes there. Again, another time where the place went pin drop silent. Absolutely crazy. Luke Bernard Hires sent in Ngannou beat him Fury, Eddie, despite what 2 of the judges said. So he feels that Ngannou beat Fury, and that is his nomination for upset of the year. He doesn't care about what 2 of the judges said. False.
Wow. A fight that, and the thing is, I understand a lot of people think that, but absolutely not, because I rewatched it without sound. He did not win the fight. He lost by about 3 points. And I think, it was about 3 points, and that was only because of the knockdown. There was 3, otherwise it would have been 4 points. And it was like, I understand. See, the thing is, when we watch fights and watch fighters in particular, we're expecting to see something, right? And we expected to see Tyson dominating Ngannou, which didn't really happen, although he won more rounds and won the fight by enough of a margin. It still didn't look how we expected it to look. So with that being said, people are going to now look at, he got robbed. He didn't do this. Or he didn't do that. He didn't win in the way he should have won. So we're not going to give him the fight. But that's not how it works. Boxing has scoring. I literally mean, not just me and a few other people. And there was a lot of people scoring the fight as it was happening in front of us. We watched it with no sound. He did not win the fight. But if that's your pick, that would be upset of the year if he had won. But the fact that he didn't, it's not upset of the year.
Okay.
But I get where he's going with it, though.
Okay. Interesting nomination anyway. Tuba TJ says Parker over Wilder for me. We all knew Parker had the skills and that Wilder had been inactive, but that right hand has always bailed him out. Nobody expected a totally one-sided near shutout from Joseph Parker. That, again, is a fantastically worded nomination from our friend Tuba TJ out there in Hawaii. Good to hear from you, Tuba, by the way, or TJ, I should say. Yeah, that's a fantastic nomination. Obviously, it's fresh in our minds, so it's not my upset of the year, and my upset of the year. I've got two, I believe. My top two are ones that haven't been mentioned and are really kind of obscure ones. But yeah, I've noted through the year, like I've got some notes on my phone, and through the year, if something happens, I go like, right, that's on there. That's on the short list of knockout of the year. That's on the short list of upset of the year. Sometimes I forget to add ones in, but ones I do remember I put there. And my two upsets of the year that I do have listed down are really big upsets, but no one's mentioned them. But this one here is a good upset. Happy for Joe, as I said in part one. He's a great guy, but it's not going to win my personal upset of the year. But another great entry from Tuba TJ, who I think has probably entered every category. Right, so my two, I'm going to start with number 2 and then get to 1. Again, this is really digging deep here. But number 2, Ricardo Martinez. This is a name that most people will go, who the hell is that? Ricardo Martinez upsetting Nordin Ubali, former world champion. Ubali was coming off a stoppage loss to Nonito Donaire 2 years earlier. He hadn't boxed for 2 years. Other than that, he was a good world champion. I think he was like 14-0 when he lost to Donaire, so he was like 14-1. He comes back to the ring after 2 years inactivity and fights this journeyman Ricardo Martinez, who had a record of 9-9, and ends up losing a decision to Ricardo Martinez. That was a huge upset there. But bigger than that has to be Michael Agundo. Again, I'm really proud of myself for these ones here. This is proper hardcore territory here. But yeah, Michael Agundo. Who the hell's that? Well, he's the guy that stopped Lamont Peterson. Obviously, like Nordin Ubali, Lamont Peterson was coming off a stoppage loss. He was actually coming off 4 years in activity. But again, he got stopped. He actually got stopped in 4 rounds by Agundo, who was 16-16. That, for me, was just inconceivable. I couldn't believe it when that happened. Lamont Peterson stopped by a guy who was 16-16. Even if he's had 4 years out the ring, he was supposed to come back and stop Agundo, and it was going to be like another comeback for Lamont Peterson. Well, I hope he never comes back to the ring after that. But that, I've picked 2 upsets there, both against former world champions who have been beaten, in one case stopped, by a complete and utter journeyman that no one has ever heard of. So those 2 guys there, Michael Agundo and Ricardo Martinez, I tip my hat to both of those guys for upset of the year. That only leaves one final category, and it's going to be female fighter of the year. Last but not least, of course. Now, we've had a couple people send in their nominations. We've got a guy here called Casual Cass. Casual Cass says Alicia Baumgardner. Alicia had 2 fights this year, by the way. She beat Ellen McCalled back in February. She beat her there. She picked up the... what title? The WBA title that time there. She had the other 3 main belts, IBF, WBC, WBO, from the fight with Mikaela Mayer. She picked up the WBA against McCalled, but it was vacant. She managed to drop McCalled, but win on points in New York. Then obviously after that, she managed to avenge the sole defeat on her record to Christina Linardato. But obviously there's a bit of a PED scandal now with Alicia Baumgardner. So regardless of that anyway, she's not my female fighter of the year. Asgi says Sandy Ryan. That's a really interesting pick, and I like his thinking behind it. He says Sandy Ryan because she was robbed of her moment against Jessica McCaskill. That's absolutely 100% right. She definitely beat McCaskill, but they gave it a draw. I don't know what's really happening with Sandy, but the other fight that she had this year was against Mary Pierre Hall, and she was able to beat her in Cardiff for the vacant WBO world title. So she did become world champion in what was just her 7th fight. But yeah, she should have been, a unified champion with like 3 of the 4 belts against McCaskill, and I really couldn't believe the decision there when they announced the draw. So I like Asgi's picks. We've been sent in Sky Nicholson from Mr. SP. I think she's been quite active this year, Sky Nicholson, but I definitely wouldn't consider her for female fighter of the year. She's had 4 fights actually. Yeah, again, not really against good enough opposition for me to consider her, but I do like the fact that she's had 4 fights. Red G-Man NYC has nominated Katie Taylor. I'm not going to give it to Katie just for the simple fact that she lost earlier this year to Chantel Cameron. Yes, she did come back and beat her in a rematch, and it was brilliant. She definitely won the rematch, definitely. But she's lost the fight this year, so I can't give her female fighter of the year, just like I can't give Chantel Cameron female fighter of the year, despite her beating Katie Taylor in the first fight, which was a bigger upset, I guess, than the rematch. What else do we have? Boxing Vibe has nominated Jessica Neri Plata. I'm going to go straight to my picks now because Neri Plata is on my female fighter of the year list. Basically, I've got 5 female fighters to mention here, and I'm not going to do number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. I'm just going to do in any order the 5 women that I think have been fighter of the year. Female fighter of the year. So I'm going to start just where we left off there. Obviously, the nomination that came in from Boxing Vibe, Jessica Neri Plata. So she's on my list. Jessica Neri Plata. Obviously, unified champion. She's had 2 fights this year. She's beaten 2 undefeated fighters, Kim Clavel and Sarah Borman. And in both fights, she's had to travel to her opponent's backyard like a true champion and has defended successfully in both of them. She's gone to Canada to fight Kim Clavel and gone to Germany to fight Sarah Borman. And like I say, they say to be a true champion, you've got to defend your title around the world. And she's done that this year, so credit to her. Also, Yokasta Val as well has to be mentioned in the conversation. This unified champion's had 3 fights this year also, barely lost a round in all 3 fights. She's gone the distance in all 3 of them, so she's done 30 rounds and barely lost a round. She took 1 undefeated record, and also she beat former world champion Annabelle Ortiz. I must mention as well Gabriela Fundora. She's had 3 fights, so on my list she's one of the most active. 2 points wins, and then she stopped former, I think, 3-time world champion, long reigning Aureli Messino for the IBF world title. That was an incredible win there for Gabriela Fundora. So for me, she's been so impressive really since her pro debut. She was nailed on to become a world champion, and she's done it this year, and she's had a fantastic year, so she definitely gets a mention. For her to stop Messino, I mean, that wasn't expected there. Dina Forsland as well, she gets a mention. She's had 2 fights this year, a defense successful against a former champion Deborah Lopez, and then successfully unified against Julian Avila. That was a really good year for Dina. And last but not least, Sinisa Estrada. She's had 2 fights this year. Isn't that crazy? We interviewed Natasha Jonas earlier on in the show, and while we've been recording this bit, Mikaela Mayer's just texted me. How weird is that? Anyway, back on track, sorry. Sinisa Estrada, 2 fights this year, unified against the undefeated WBC champion Tina Ruprecht, and then defended both belts against former champion Leonela Udisa. So, again, a good year there for Sinisa Estrada. They are my 5 top female fighters of the year in no particular order. And as for British Fighter of the Year, this was a category that I didn't really want to put on social media because basically people kind of misunderstand it sometimes. I don't usually include world champions. I've done it in the past, and people say Tyson Fury, Josh Taylor, but it's more for like a kind of domestic sort of level kind of British thing there. and some people just get a bit confused. So I've just decided to keep that category for myself. So British Fighter of the Year, even though I've just said what I said, I am going to start with a world champion. So I'm kind of completely doing a U-turn on what the rules are for this category, but I'm making an exception here. Number 1 British Fighter of the Year is Chris Billam-Smith. 2 fights this year. Lawrence Okoli obviously dethroned him, which was a massive, massive upset, even though it has to be said that I've said it on many occasions, really. I think it was more Chris Billam-Smith, Lawrence Okoli kind of beating himself in that fight, really. Hard pause there. But yeah, I think it was more him sort of beating himself than Chris Billam-Smith being so great. I don't think he was particularly fantastic in that fight, but he did what he needed to do, stuck to a good game plan. And then obviously he was losing almost every round to Masternek a couple weeks ago, whenever it was, and manages to find a shot that breaks Masternek's ribs. Masternek quits on his stall, and Chris Billam-Smith gets his first successful defence there. Both fights have took place in Bournemouth. He's brought some great atmospheres as well. So for me, Chris Billam-Smith is the British Fighter of the Year. In second place, it really can't be anyone else but this man. He's gone this year from English title level up to European level. You know who it is. He took away Brad Paul's O at the start of the year. Then he got in there with Macaulay McGowan in an interesting fight. And then, most recently, getting his first career stoppage in 23 fights when he knocked out the reigning EBU European middleweight champion Matteo Signani when he stopped him there in round 8. He was stopped on a cut, but I don't give a damn. It's his first stoppage, and he's become European champion there. That man being Tyler Denny. Unbelievable career turnaround for this guy. He's having a real Indian summer. Number 3, British Fighter of the Year, number 3. It goes, for me, to Nick Ball. I think he's bringing a hell of a lot of excitement to the small, the little weight divisions, if you like. Not so little, but a knockout in the 12th and final round against Ladumo Lamarty, in which Lamarty ended up obviously being hospitalised, which that was horrible to see, but he was brutal in that fight there. And then the way he dominated former world champion Isaac Dogboe, that was just so special. I was so impressed with Nick Ball. He's got dynamite in both hands. He's extremely strong and extremely fit. He really showed that against Dogboe. He can be hit a little bit, but he's exciting. Like I say, brings excitement to the lower weights, and he, for me, has done enough to be number 3. Number 4, I've given to Liam Davies. An interesting win against the Italian Lamino, who came for a real fight and actually dropped Liam Davies. That one was a bit of a shock, but obviously Davies managed to get him out of there in the end. And the knockout in the very first round against former European champion Jason Cunningham, that was so impressive. That was such a shocking win there for Liam Davies. So he, for me, gets number 4. And I've done a number 5, last but not least, Reece Bellotti, man. I have to say it. What a fantastic year he has had, especially the fact that it wasn't too long ago that I think he was considering retirement. He boxed just once in 2020, once in 2021. He was coming off 3 losses in a row from 2019, the back end, to the back end of 2021. Come back with a win in 2022 early on. And then he's out the ring for 14 months before he has his first fight in 2023, a fight that I was ringside for. He got in there with Yusuf Kamari. That was on the Sonny Edwards Andres Campos undercard. Got in there with Yusuf Kamari. I'm pretty sure that Reece Bellotti was an underdog. Managed to beat him fair and square on points. It was a really good performance from him. Then he gets in with Akib Fiaz, and again he was an underdog and managed to actually stop Akib Fiaz and take his O. I tell you what, he's had an unbelievable year, and like I say, from losing 3 fights in a row, he's now on a bit of a run, and he's having an Indian summer as well. So I'm really, really happy for him. I've always been a fan of his, to be honest. I've seen him a few times from ringside. He's always, very game, and I remember him stopping, I think it was Jason Cunningham, if I'm not mistaken. That was a mad fight a few years ago at York Hall, I want to say. That was a brilliant fight. So like I say, he's still here doing big things in 2023 when it looked like he was down and out a few years ago. Fantastic. So yeah, that is it. Fight of the year done. Knockout of the year done. Fighter of the year done. Young fighter of the year done. British Fighter of the Year done, Upset of the Year done, and Female Fighter of the Year done. Thank you so much for all your nominations. It's always fun getting the listeners involved. We need to do it a little bit more, but it's great going through those kinds of categories at the end of the year. We look back at the mad year we've had, and we've been spoiled this year as boxing fans. There's been so many good fights, from Spence Crawford to Inoue, Fulton. These are off the top of my head. What else? What other great fights have we had? Ryan Garcia against Gervonta Tank Davis. There's been so many. I can't even think of any others, but there's been so many great fights domestically and internationally on the world scene, small hall scene. There's been so many fantastic fights been made this year. We've been spoiled, actually, so it's been hard to kind of narrow down a small list of knockouts, and there's just been so many contenders for all the categories. We really have been spoiled this year, but hopefully 2024 is also just as good. Just before we wrap it up, Eddie, and I come in with the outro, if you just want to sign out with a little message just to close off the year, this is the last podcast of the year. We'll be back next year, of course.
Yeah, man, it was a great year. There's some great fights we've seen, some I didn't see, but saw later. Need to stay on my craft a little bit more, make sure I pay attention to more of these fights for multitude of reasons. But anyway, it was a great year, man. Shout out to the guys who've been watching and been listening, and obviously been paying attention to boxing this year. Keep the support going for us in the sport of boxing, because we need them.
There we go. Well, that's it. The final thing for me to do this year is to come in with the outro, which I'll do in just a few seconds. Okay, and this wraps up episode 428 of the BoxHard Podcast. I've been your host, Joey Coastman. Eddie Chambers has been with me for the duration of the show. A special thank you to this week's special guest, the reigning IBF welterweight female world champion, Miss Natasha Jonas. The biggest thanks of all, though, goes out to you, the listeners. Thanks once again for tuning in. It's been a long episode, so I'm sorry if it's been a bit too long for some people, but like I say, we had to go through all those awards at the end. It was fun. I hope you did enjoy it. I want to wish you all a happy new year. Hopefully boxing brings us just as much next year as it has done this year. That's about everything, though, from myself. Enjoy your weekends, people. Stay safe, and we shall see you all again same time next week.